Hello and welcome to English Digest. I'm Seb.
I'm Elsie.
And we are back with this month's topic-based writing. And we're going to be doing this one from home, aren't we?
Right.
Right. We're talking about distance learning, okay? So distance learning is basically when you take a course or take a class. It could be over the internet. Normally it's over the internet, and you can do this from your home rather than going to a classroom. So let's find out a little bit more about today's assignment. So today we're doing a topic writing assignment. In other words, we're going to be developing a short written piece out of a random subject. What are we talking about today, Elsie?
今天我们的叙述文要讲的是呢，关于 study from home 在家远距上课的主题。So because of the COVID-19 pandemic, students in Taiwan had to stay home and have classes. 学生们必须要在家上课。This changed the way students learn.
Right. That's one thing I love and one thing I hate. Actually, two things I hate. So staying at home, fantastic. Studying at home, not so much. COVID-19 even worse. So there's a lot of things that we can talk about here. What is the full assignment?
好，我们看到题目呢，给我们的是今年5月，基于防疫考量，大部分台湾高中职以下的学生经历了人生第一次的远距学习。上课的场景呢，由教室转移到自己的空间，学习的过程呢，则必须仰赖大量的科技产品辅助。相信这令很多人都感到印象深刻。现在呢，要请同学们以An unforgettable experience of distance learning 为题目，描述一次远距学习的经验，并且说明呢这次经验背后的原因、过程、当下的感受、结果，还有后续对自己的影响。那文章必须至少是120个单字，而且必须要分段。
Okay, so I feel like we both have a lot to talk about with today's assignment because, Elsie, you've been teaching online during the pandemic, haven't you?
Right.
And I've been learning online. So what was your experience like teaching online?
At first, I didn't really like it because I wasn't sure if all my students were paying attention in classes. I also had to spend more time preparing for my lessons, but as time went by, I kind of got used to it. So now I feel it's okay. And I think my students did too.
Okay. So for today's assignment, we're going to be talking about an unforgettable experience of distance learning. The key word here is unforgettable. When something is unforgettable, you can't stop thinking about it, normally because it was a really good experience. So what the assignment is implying is that we should write about a very positive online learning experience or one that brought about a lot of changes for us.
没错，今天的主题是 an unforgettable experience of distance learning. Unforgettable 这个形容词代表难以忘记的，所以呢，你要写的是一个最特别、最难忘的经验。
So, for example, an unforgettable offline, that's 离线 learning experience that I had was my 11th and 12th grade Spanish class. I had a fantastic teacher who was very passionate about Spanish popular culture, and she spent a lot of time teaching us about Spanish rock and pop music, as well as Spanish movies. Some of my favorite movies today I actually learnt about in that class. So for me, it was a very unforgettable learning experience.
Nice. I guess a good teacher can make learning fun and motivate students to push themselves, right?
Exactly. So you should have no trouble teaching online at this point.
Yeah, but I have to spend a lot of time preparing, like I said. Okay, so now how do we develop an approach?
Right. So now we're thinking about education. It's time for us to take a closer look at today's assignment. First off, we're going to need to think about what kind of writing we are going to be doing. It could be a review, an article, a letter, a story, etc. What is it for today, Elsie?
刚刚有提到过，今天要写的是叙述文。那什么是叙述文呢？叙述文呢，它是一种运用非常广泛的文体，常常出现在大考的作文题目当中。常见的类型有：第一个，叙述经验或是事件；第二个，叙述物品；第三个，叙述人物。那本单元着重于描述经验的叙述文。
Right. In English, shushu is narrative. A narrative is basically a fancy word for story. But we don't necessarily need to be rewriting The Lord of the Rings. Narratives can just be short stories that share your personal experience with a thing, place, person, or situation. Of course, you're going to want to structure your narrative properly, though.
没错，那我们要写什么？怎么写呢？一样哦，英文作文的架构基本上就是分为引言 （introduction）、文章的主体 （body） 还有结论 （conclusion）。在叙述文里面一样也要出现这一些部分。那 introduction 是文章的引言，说明书写这篇文章的动机。全文的主旨句 thesis statement 常会在第一段点出来。在描述经验的文章当中啊 introduction 可以有以下几种方法开头。第一个，在这个经验发生之前，你对此经验抱持什么样的看法？第二个，一般人对此经验的看法。第三个，这个经验对你个人的意义是什么？同学们可以三选一，选一个来做你的 introduction。
Remember here that narratives are different to essays. In both essays and narratives, you need a thesis statement to make the direction of your writing clear. However, the purposes of these two writing styles are different. With essays, you are often trying to convince someone or share an opinion, so your thesis statement will often set out your point of view or argument. For example, a simple essay-style thesis statement for today's topic would be, I think distance learning is great, or I think distance learning is terrible. That sets out an opinion that you can develop into a full written argument. Narratives, however, are different. You're taking the reader on a storytelling journey, so you need to give them a clear idea of where they're going to begin. For example, I had a great experience with distance learning during lockdown. So this second thesis statement is different to our first example. Instead of expressing an opinion, it shares an experience. It makes it clear to the reader that we are about to tell them about something that happened, not something we have an opinion about. It creates interests. It makes the reader think, I want to know more about that. And we'll tell them more about it once we get onto the second part of our structure, the body.
没错 body 是文章主体，非常的重要。那通常呢是过程的叙述，许多相关的细节 supporting details 也都在这边加以描述。那在叙述整个经验的过程当中呢，可以依照事件发生的顺序来描述，也可以用倒叙法。不过要特别注意时态的一致性哦。以下为常见的叙述文架构。A. 何时发生，也就是用 when 来带出。何地发生 where， 参与者有谁 who。再来，为什么会发生 why， 如何发生 how。接下去，事件是如何收场的，结果是什么，也就是你在说 the result or the consequence。最后，事情发生中或发生后，你的感受感想如何 how you felt。
Right. There they are again, the 5 W's and 1 H that I'm always talking about. The 5 W's and 1 H are who, what, where, why, when, why, and how. We always must use all of these in news writing. They're important for other styles, like narrative writing, too. Know that you don't always have to use all of these if you're not writing about news. If you're writing about news, you do need to use all 5 and 1 H. However, sometimes with stories, it might be awkward or tricky to get all of them in. So, still, thinking about the 5 W's and 1 H will be a good guide for planning your writing, as well as reviewing what you've written afterward to make sure you didn't leave anything out and that your story makes sense.
没错，5个 WH 加上一个 how。这些问句呢，都可以让你更清楚你对这些问句的回答是什么。那这些回答内容就会是你的文章主体。那再来呢，就会到我们的 conclusion 文章的结论，说明意义和你的体会。那在描述经验的文章当中呢，可以说明这事件给你了 什么样的启示，自己有什么样的体会，还有对自己有什么样的改变或影响。那接下来呢 It's time for brainstorming, right? Let's do some brainstorming together.
Yes, it is. So today's brainstorming exercise is all about planning your thoughts so that they follow a logical storyline. Before we get into it, though, we need to work out what we are going to talk about. For that, I've worked out a quick mind mapping exercise for you guys. Take out a blank piece of paper and write before, during, and after in 3 separate bubbles, spaced out across the page. These are going to help you think about what happened and how you felt about distance learning over time. Got those down? Great. Now, in 5 minutes, I want you to quickly write down all of the important thoughts and experiences you had about distance learning before you experienced it, while it was happening, and after the experience ended. So, for example, before you could write, I had no experience with distance learning. I thought it wasn't right for me, and I struggled to get work done outside of class. Those are all things that happened before the lockdown. Then for during, you could put, the teacher planned the classes very well, and I was surprised by how much progress I made. And then lastly, for after, when you'd finished your online learning experience, you could write, I had a positive experience with learning online, and perhaps I think in-class lessons are better for me, but it was an interesting experience. Once you have some ideas down, we can take them and use them in today's brainstorming exercise. Can you tell us more about it, Elsie?
Sure. 所以今天呢，我们要看到的是怎么样依照时间排列事件发生的顺序。用的就是所谓的顺序法来描述我们的经验，是很常见的叙述手法。那这样子呢，也可以善用杂志上的时间轴来整理事件的经过。好，所以杂志这边有提供给你。那不过如果你自己碰到作文题目，你自己可以去画这个时间轴来整理事件的经过。像是这边你看到了很多格子，以及有向上的符号，向下的箭头。所以第一个你可以写进去的是 I didn't know much about this distance learning before lockdown. 我之前是不了解远距学习的。再来第二个I was nervous on the first day. 第一天的时候，我相当的紧张。第三个 Our teacher spent the first day going over the online resources. 老师第一天花了整天的时间帮我们整理线上的一些资源。第四个 She was patient even when students had technical problems. 碰到问题的时候，像是技术性的问题，老师还是非常的有耐心。在第五个 We all felt more comfortable by Friday of the first week. 到了第一周的最后一天，星期五的时候，我们都觉得比较习惯线上学习这个东西了。再来第六个I think our teacher made distance learning easier. 有一个小小的结论，他認為老師讓整個線上學習的過程更簡單了。
You know, I think our story is coming along quite nicely. Now we know what we're going to say and the order we want to say it, we need to start thinking about outlines. Let's take a look at today's outline.
今天的 outline 架構的部分，我们来看到主题句第一个 I didn't know much about distance learning before this May. 今年5月之前，我是不太了解远距学习的。再来 A, some of my classmates had tried it for after-school classes. 我的同学呢，有一些人有试过，那不过呢，是在 after-school classes 课后的这个学习，像是补习班啦、安亲班等等的。再来 B, I didn't think it would work for full-time school classes. 我的感觉是我觉得它不适合用在整天学校的课程当中。C, however, 有一个转折 My opinions of it changed after the first week. 带出作者呢，他是第一周之后，意见想法就改变了。所以这边作者先说明自己之前是不太了解远距教学的，也不认为学校适合整天都用远距教学，但是最后作者用 however 带出因为第一周的经验让他的意见想法改变。
This is a great outline for the first paragraph because it's very clear to read. The topic sentence, I didn't know much about distance learning before this May, both starts the paragraph and the story. and it's also our thesis statement. Sentences 2 and 3 give us background. They say what we thought about distance learning before we tried it and what our experience was with it when the story began. Our last sentence gives us a bit of plot development. So that is something that, changes the story or gives us kind of a direction that we can expect the story is going to go in. It's a sentence that tells us the story is going to change and develop, and it gives us a reason to read on.Let's find out how things changed in paragraph 2.
好，在第二段的地方呢，作者就承上启下说明这一次的经验、结果以及后续对自己的影响。所以主题句第二句是 My classmates and I were all nervous on the first day. 第一天都非常的紧张。再来 A, we didn't know what would happen or how the class would work. 我们是不知道会发生什么事情，也不知道该怎么样进行。B,Our teacher was prepared and spent the first day going over it. 我们的老师早就准备好了，而且第一天都让我们了解远距教学这个东西是什么。再来 C, Some of us had technical issues, but our teacher was patient and humorous. 有一些我们的同学呢有技术上的问题，但是老师很有耐心，而且很幽默。再来 D,We all felt more comfortable by the end of the first week. 第一周下来，我们都习惯了。结论句带出来什么呢？ Our teacher's positive attitude made distance learning so much easier. 因为老师的正向态度让远距教学更轻松简单。And that's our outline.
It is. Okay, so we've got everything that we need to start writing.So we'll take a quick break here, and then when we're back, we will take a look at our basic and advanced samples. Basic sample. Before Taiwan went into lockdown in May,I didn't know how much about distance learning. Some of my classmates did after-school classes online, but I thought it couldn't work for full-time school. However, once I got through the first week of distance learning, my opinion of it changed for the better. My classmates and I were all nervous on our first day learning from home. We didn't know what to expect or how we would do our assignments, but our teacher,Mrs. Xu, was very prepared. She spent the whole first day going over the online class resources she had made for us. It took us some time to get used to, and many students had technical issues, but Miss Xu was patient and helped us find humor in this new situation. By Friday, we all felt more comfortable and confident. Although studying from home was tough, our teacher's hard work and positive attitude,made distance learning so much easier. Wow, okay, they had a great teacher, and I think that really helped them do better. I think having a good teacher, or a teacher who is going to make it easy for the students to understand how to use the technology, or who is creative with her classes, is going to help a lot. And that's kind of what we saw in this basic sample.So basically, this person didn't know much about it, and the change was that they had a great teacher, and that showed them that it could be actually not so bad after all. Now, there's a couple of phrases in here which I think we should go over. The first one is go into lockdown. So lockdown is one of those very new COVID words that we didn't talk about so much before 2020, but now it's a very common word. When something locks down, when a place locks down, everything in that place closes. So all the shops, the restaurants, the bars, the museums, they all close and people have to stay home. So Taiwan is not really in lockdown because, you can still get some food from restaurants to go. You can go to the supermarket, but it is in semi-lockdown. A lot of things are closed right now. An example of lockdown I can give you is during COVID, the UK went into lockdown twice, during which people could only leave their homes once a day. And I remember my family were telling me at the time that to go to the supermarket, for example, during that time would take them maybe 4 to 5 hours because everything was closed and they only let a few people in the store at a time. So you had to queue for 2 hours to go into the supermarket.
Wow, you have to wait for your turn to go into the supermarket.
Yes.
所以当我们要说进入这个关闭的状态，就是大家都不能出门的状态，是 go into lockdown.
Exactly. Now, another useful one here is after school, and we're using this as a compound adjective. It's joined together with that little dash. When something is after school, an after-school class or an after-school project is something you do when your regular classes have finished. So, for example, an after-school sports club. We could also call this something extracurricular. Now, extracurricular is not exactly the same as after school. It just means anything you do, whether it's a project, a sports game, joining a team, that isn't for your part of your regular class. You're not going to fail school if you don't join the basketball team. So basketball is extracurricular. And lastly, we have one other here, change for the better. So change for the better basically means to improve or to change in a very good way. So, for example, Rex didn't get on with his mum as a teenager, but their relationship changed for the better after he grew up.
所以呢 change for the better 代表想法是往好的方向改变，或是发展上是往好的方向前进。那什么时候想法转变呢？我们的文章是在他 got through the first week of distance learning 之后，那 get through something 代表就是度过某事。那再来呢，他们还碰到了 technical issues， 代表的是技术上的问题，像是连线上的问题啦，电脑设备这个耳机、麦克风等等设备上的问题也是属于 technical issues. Okay, so I think now it's time for us to go to our second sample.
It is. Advanced sample. Before May, I had never really thought about distance learning or assessed it for my own use. I knew other countries were implementing it because of COVID-19, and here in Taiwan, my uncle occasionally told me about his online degree program from an American university. However, now that I have experienced distance learning firsthand, I can say without question that I'm not a fan of how it has been implemented here. I know my instructors are under pressure, but it often seems like they're taking it out on us without considering that we are terribly stressed by the pandemic as well. Just a few weeks into lockdown, my history teacher gave us an essay-based test. All day, my internet connection had been unreliable, and when I tried to submit my essay, I couldn't do it. I clicked the submit button frantically, but I was nearly a minute late. The cherry on top of this frenzied experience was that I received a 0 for my trouble. I was aghast, so my parents encouraged me to appeal to my teacher in writing. It was to no avail. The 0 remained. My older brother saw my distress and sent an indignant letter to my teacher to support my story, but my teacher stood firm. Such a rigid obedience to arbitrary rules breeds fear and resentment in students, as demonstrated by the reactions of my brother and me. Schools should use the unique opportunity of distance learning to improve our education, not just to maintain harmful, punitive old systems. Ooh, so somebody did not have a good experience with online distance learning.
Right.
You can see in the second one.
Yeah, and the author really gave a lot of more details when describing the whole situation. In the second paragraph.
We can almost imagine this kind of narrative being used in a review or in an opinion article. You know, somebody could put this on a news page, or they could leave it on a Google review if they are trying to give a story about why they don't like a service. So this is a really good way, a good skill to learn if you want to write a complaint to show that you're not happy. There is a ton of good vocabulary. I really recommend that you guys take a closer look at this sample. But we're going to look at a couple of the of the highlights. The first one is assess, which we saw right at the beginning of the passage. I had never really thought about distance learning or assessed it for my own use. When we assess something, we basically test it so we can form an opinion of it. So when you started teaching online, Elsie, you probably assessed the best ways of teaching online. You probably tried some different things and thought, this one seems to work, this one doesn't really work. Okay, I'll use this in the future. And that right there is an assessment. You're making a decision.
也就是做评估的动作。
Exactly. We can also use the noun form assessment to talk about specific kinds of tests. So if you're trying to get a new job, for example, and you get given a small exam, we could call that an assessment of your ability as well. We also saw the word implement. Now, implement basically means to carry out or 进行. So when we implement a rule or we implement any other method, we take something, a rule or a plan, and we put it into use. So here we're talking about implementing online distance learning. We're not just talking about it, we're not planning it, we're actually making the students take online courses. And that is implementation of online distance learning. Lastly, I want to look at this one idiom that we've got in the middle of the passage, the cherry on top. The cherry on top of this frenzied experience was that I received a 0 for my trouble. Now, the cherry on top of something is normally the best of a good situation. So, for example, summer vacation starts next week, and the cherry on top is that I'm going traveling in Japan. However, we can also use it in negative situations as well if we want to say that something bad happened, and on top of that, something even worse happened. The cherry on top is basically talking about, you know, like cupcakes, little cakes when you've got the pieces of fruit on the top, and the piece of fruit is the best thing of the whole cake. It's that added little special thing. So whenever we're using the cherry on top, we always need to think of something extra good or extra bad that also happened in that situation.
所以 the cherry on top 可以表示好事当中最好的那个，还有相反的就是坏事当中更坏的那个，你也可以用 the cherry on top 来表示，像是我们的文章一样。再来呢，还有几个字跟同学们介绍，像是 first hand 这个副词呢，代表第一手的。那这边在说的是他亲身第一手体验远距教学、远距学习。那再来还有一个是 do something frantically 这个副词啊，代表紧张忙乱的，所以他在做整件事情的时候，他慌乱的去点击脚胶的按钮，然后呢，他就拥有了这个疯狂的经验。这边的疯狂的不用 crazy 这么简单的字来形容，我们用 frenzied experience 疯狂的经验。
Exactly. Okay, it seems like we are out of time for talking about our advanced sample. I hope you guys have enjoyed this distance learning experience as much as we have. We're going to be seeing you again later in the month to talk more about our other writing assignments and our translation topic. So join us then. Until then, bye-bye.
Bye.